Hi friends, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. Today it is time for a book haul because I haven't done one of these in a while. There was a time where I was kind of going through an overhaul. Me and Ben were reorganizing my bookshelves, and at that point some of the new books that I was buying were just going straight onto the shelves instead of in, like, normally I'll keep them in a little bit of a dedicated pile so that they can be hauled in a video at some point and then I'll find spots for them. But I've kind of pulled out a bunch of the books that I've acquired over the past few months, and I think I may have missed some, but this is a good representation of what I've acquired and what I've bought. And we do have a range of things here. Obviously, there's a lot of fantasy like normal for me, but we also have a couple of nonfictions, literary fiction, thrillers, all sorts of things. So I'm really excited to get into it and let you know what I've got. So first things first, we have a romance book that I have actually already read, which is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. And this is a book where our main concept is that our main characters, Justin and Emma, both have this curse where every time they date someone and then break up with them, the person that has just broken up with them goes on to find their soulmate as the next person that they meet or date. So they aren't sure if they're cursed for real or if they just have extremely bad luck, but both of them struggle with this same thing. And so the idea that they have is that if they date each other and then break up, the curse will be broken because the next person that both of them meets should be their soulmates based on the effects of each other's curses. So this was so much fun, everything that I love in a romance book, because it had the fun and funny moments and kind of the light, fun, loving aspects, but it also has some very emotional aspects for both of the characters, and that's something that I really like in romance too, is I guess you could call it the personal development aspect, where yes, there's a romance going on, but both characters also have things that they need to work on and that they are working on in their lives. And I would 100% recommend this because I really, really enjoyed myself with it. But this is Abby Jimenez's newest release, and this is technically the third book in a series. I believe it's called the Part of Your World series. And I haven't read the others, so I do realize that when I go back to read the others, there will probably be characters that I recognize that maybe made an appearance in this book, but I'm personally okay with that. So if you really want to read them in order, then don't start with this one. But if you don't mind that, then you should definitely read this as a perfect romance for this summer. So next up, we have City of Last Chances by Tchaikovsky, and is this not the most gorgeous cover ever? I absolutely love the way that these books look, but after I read Guns of the Dawn by Tchaikovsky somewhat recently, I was happy to see that after reading that standalone and getting a taste of his writing, that I really, really liked him. And so that kind of spurred me on to buy a few more of his books. And I was especially interested in this series that's being published right now. The second book has come out as well. And I'm not sure what the name of the series is, but the second book is called House of Open Wounds. And so the description of this book is essentially saying that we have a city called Ilmar, and it has a darkness to it. It has an underbelly, and it definitely has a populace that is not satisfied, and it kind of refers to the fact that this city might be on the brink of rebellion and revolution. And so there is a portal when the moon is full in this city, I guess, that will end up being the catalyst for whatever it is that happens in this book. And I don't know too much more about it than that basic premise, but I'm really, really looking forward to reading more Tchaikovsky. So this, I believe, is supposed to be a trilogy, and I thought that I would kind of jump into this next and pick it up rather than his super long Shadows of the Apt series, just because I've got some long series going on in my reading life right now, so I might be more ready for that further down the road, but I wanted more Tchaikovsky. Then, because, I like to be thorough, I decided to also purchase Cage of Souls, which is a sci-fi standalone by Tchaikovsky. And this one is dealing with our city that is called Shadrapar. and it is the last of all cities with fewer than 100,000 human souls. And we have our main character named Stefan, but it seems like the main idea of this book is that humanity is struggling to survive on this planet, which is not Earth, but there are other beings, other things that are very alien to the human race that live on this world, and I think that the human race is fighting for survival and fighting to see who is going to prevail and be able to live on this planet in this book. Next up, we have another romance, The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren, and I thought this one sounded super fun because we have our main characters named Anna and Liam, and they both went to UCLA, and while they were there, Anna was marrying Liam for access to subsidized housing, but after graduation, she thought they were going to get divorced, but it turns out that Liam has something in his family. His family obviously has a lot of money, and in order for Liam to have access to his inheritance, he has to have been married for 5 years. And so I'm not really sure where it goes from there, but I think that he's going to be forced to kind of like introduce Anna to his family and deal with all of that and pretend to be married. And obviously they must be friends on some level, but in a way I still hope this gives sort of like the fake dating vibes, because they're obviously going to have to pretend to be a real married couple for his entire family, even though that is not actually the truth of their situation. So I'm hoping that this has some fun aspects, and I'm looking forward to it. Next up, we have another new release, and that is The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton. I also own The Devil in the Dark Water by this author, and I think probably what Stuart Turton is more well known for is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which I also haven't read. So I now own, I don't own that one, but I now own 2 books by this author without having read from him yet, but the premises of his books just sound so darn interesting. So this one is essentially a very, very small island that is surrounded by this fog, and the inciting incident for this book is that a murder takes place, and the person who has been murdered, I believe, is one of the scientists that helps keep this island safe from the fog encroaching on it. And so the countdown is on because they have only got maybe a few days or maybe up to a week before the barrier expires or something, and so they have to solve the mystery, and in order to do that, they're also saving themselves from this imminent threat. And I just think that this is hopefully going to be thrilling with a great mystery, and I think it sounds great, so I can't wait to read it. Next up, we have a thriller called Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister, and this is sort of like a Groundhog Day trope usage in this book, where we're following from the perspective of a mother who is waiting up for her 18-year-old son to come home one night, and while she is looking out the window, she watches her son murder somebody, and she is understandably confused, distraught. She doesn't know what she just witnessed happen or why. She doesn't think that, her son and the life that he lives and the life that they've built, how he could do this, she has no idea. But when she wakes up the next day, it's the same day. And so I think that it's just that she is needing to solve the mystery of why this happened or what is even happening, and she's trying to fix it and find answers. So I think that this sounds really, really interesting, and I do love the use of this trope when it's done well and in an interesting way. Next up, one that I don't really have a lot to say about because I don't actually know what it's about, is To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. I recently found this in Value Village used because one thing that Ben and I are working on is which books that he is bringing with him when he moves here versus the ones that he is either donating, leaving behind to his friends or family or whoever might want them. And then we've also had to make the decision that some of the classics are pretty easily found secondhand here as well, so there's no sense in committing to bringing those over unless they were like special to him in some way. So this is something that Ben had in his collection that I have picked up, and I will eventually want to read it as well, but this is mostly added to my collection because that is sort of our goal. And the same exact thing can be said for My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, because I want to read from this author in the future as well, but I do know that Ben has already read a book from her, and this was also a book that he had in his collection that we knew that I could find secondhand, and I found it pretty easily and pretty quickly, so we're replenishing some of those books that he's having to leave. Another book that I recently found at Value Village is The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle, which is a classic fantasy story that I'm really looking forward to reading at some point, about the last unicorn who basically ventures out of her safety and out of her home to see if she can find others of her kind. She doesn't know if she's actually the last of her kind and wants to see if she can find more unicorns, and I don't really know more about it than that, but I imagine that it is a very magical adventure, and I'm really looking forward to reading this in terms of being a little bit more well-read in that kind of classic fantasy story, and obviously I think that I have a good chance of enjoying it. Next up, we have The Husband by Holly Gramazio, and this is one where it seems sort of like literary fiction, but it also definitely has that I don't know if it's magical realism is not really the right word, but it definitely has that like supernatural element to it, where the idea in this book is that our main character, I don't believe she is married or whether she has a partner, but her name is Lauren, and one day she comes home to her apartment and there's a man there, and she's confused because she doesn't know who he is, but he is like in all of her pictures, like they are clearly married. He thinks that he's her husband. Everybody else that she knows thinks that he is her husband. Like everybody in her life knows him, but she doesn't know where he has just appeared from. And it turns out that, which is reflected on the cover of the book, that if he goes into the attic and then comes back, he'll disappear and then a different man will emerge, and like her life will rearrange itself around this event where this guy, this new person, is now her husband, and her life will reflect like what it would have been if she had married this person. But you know, like if he goes into the attic again, she's gonna come out with a new husband. And I just think that this is such a fun, interesting concept, and I'm really looking forward to reading this. I have heard that one complaint is that it could be a bit repetitive, but I'm just interested to see what the author does with this concept, because I think it'll be really fun to read, but I find myself very interested in what the chosen like resolution and ending to a story like this would be. So I'm very, very intrigued to get to this. Next up, we have The Bloodstones by fellow booktuber and self-pub author Tori Tekken, which I'm really, really looking forward to reading this. And I was disappointed when it didn't make it into SPIFBO this year, but I really hope that Tori will get her name in there next year or however long it takes. I'm really excited to read this. So I'm just going to read the first paragraph of the synopsis, because it says, "A traitor is executed, his name ripped away from history. Now the kingdom stands on the brink of a succession war that could bring the country to its knees. Forces stalk the darkness, moving pawns into place in a deadly game." And then also in the synopsis, we have a mention of our two main characters, Garen and Sindri. I think there might be a couple more perspectives in that. I think I remember that from hearing someone talk about it. However, I'm really, really excited for this because I can't wait to read Tori's writing, and I've just heard people speak very highly of it, and I think that this is exactly the type of fantasy that I like, especially with some of the character building and some of this political type world building and like a succession war. Sign me up. So this is a fantasy book that I'm really looking forward to getting to, and I mean, like I said, I wish I could be reading it for Spiff Box, but I'm just gonna read it on my own time. Next up, we have another, I guess, sort of classic fantasy, although it's not that old, and that is Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier. And this follows our main character, Sorcha, who is a member of the Seven Waters clan, but it says that her new stepmother bewitches her father and her brothers, and she loses them, and so she has to venture out from this safe area that her clan lives in and sort of venture out into the world and put herself in danger in order to try and get her father and brothers back. And the person who I most recently heard talk about this was Regan from Peruse Project, and she was the one that really convinced me to pick it up, just based on the vibes that she was kind of saying that it had, like sort of like very magical, very whimsical, and I'm just really looking forward to trying this out and seeing whether this is something that I like. Next up, we have a book that I picked up after being interested in it, honestly, for a very long time. Every time I would go to Indigo, this book and its title would catch my eye, just because I thought that the title was so hard-hitting and sounded so interesting, and that is You Feel It Just Below the Ribs, which is a novel by Jeffrey Cranor and Janina Matthewson. So every time I would see it, I would think, You Feel It Just Below the Ribs. That is such a great title. So this one is a little bit harder, I think, to pigeonhole in a certain genre. I'm just going to read the synopsis to you. It says, a manuscript containing the life story of Dr. Miriam Gregory is discovered under the floorboards of an attic room in Stockholm. It speaks of growing up during the Great Reckoning, a sprawling, decades-long war that nearly decimates humanity and strips her of friends and family. Devastated by grief and loneliness, she emotionally exiles herself, avoiding relationships or allegiances, and throws herself into her work. Disengagement that serves her well when the war finally ends and the new society arises in its wake. To ensure a lasting peace, the new society forbids anything that may cause tribal loyalties, including traditional families. Suddenly, everyone must live as Miriam has chosen to, disconnected and unattached. A prominent psychologist and researcher at heart, Miriam becomes involved in implementing this detachment process. Her understanding of how to examine and manipulate the human mind becomes the basis of a program that will transform this new world and the lives of everyone in it. But the bold claims the manuscript makes cannot be corroborated, raising disturbing questions about their very authenticity. Is this autobiography a sincere confession, or is it a fabrication set against the backdrop of reality? How many times can you filter a memory before it's really just a fiction? Miriam asks herself. It's left for you, the reader, to judge. So this is an interesting one because, like I said, this has sort of like sci-fi elements, fantasy, you could argue, futuristic, like dystopian even. I guess dystopia is sci-fi, but it also has like strong literary fiction vibes to me. So I'm just really, really intrigued to see what this is going to be like. This seems like it would be a very melancholy book, which is a vibe that I often really love. Next up, we have Relics of Ruin by Erin M. Evans, and this is the sequel to Empire of Exiles, which I just read in the month of May. So that was featured in my April and May wrap-up. And so this book series deals with the peoples of an empire that have essentially been exiled to a small corner of their continent because of a previous war with the Changelings, and the Changelings overran a lot of their kingdoms, but they managed to create a defensible position in part of their continent where now all of the peoples of this land live together in, somewhat of harmony. They all have their own smaller seats of power. There's still a lot of politics going on. And in the first book, there was the remnants and memory of a revolution that took place about 20 years ago, and there was a murder committed, and there was a mystery throughout that our characters were trying to solve. So I don't really know where book 2 is going to take it from here, honestly. I just really loved book 1, and essentially when I was finished, I went out to the bookstore and bought book 2, and I will be really looking forward to getting to this whenever I can. Next up, we have the first book in a sci-fi trilogy, which is Ancillary Justice by Anne Leckie. And so this follows our main character, Breck, who is kind of in an individual fragile body for the first time because Breck used to be part of like an artificial intelligence that was sort of like a hive mind linking all of the soldiers in the service. So this was called Justice of Torin, and Justice of Torin was like thousands of minds that were linked, but an act of treachery has ripped it all away, leaving her with one fragile human body, many unanswered questions, and a burning desire for vengeance. So I'm trying to dip my toes into a little bit more character-focused sci-fi because that seems like something that would jive with my tastes a little bit better. And reading the back of this and realizing that the description really makes it sound like Breck's journey personally and dealing with what has been done as a result of the treachery against like the Empire, or I think maybe an empire, yes. That seems like an angle on this event that will be very interesting for me and that I will like to follow. Next up, we have The Silver Blood Promise by James Logan, and this at the top of the back of the book says it's for fans of Scott Lynch, Nicholas Eames, and Joe Abercrombie. And I mean, I liked Nicholas Eames's book, but the description and the whole vibe of this is giving much more Scott Lynch and Joe Abercrombie for me personally. But we have our main character, Lucan Gardova, and it says that he's a card sharp, an academy dropout, and the disgraced heir to an ancient noble house. And so he kind of spends his days doing debauchery and he wants to figure out how he can get his old position back, but he discovers that his estranged father has been murdered, and so he wants to get to the bottom of the mystery of his father's death, and in doing so hopefully gain back some of his old life. And this just sounds really, it does sound like Lies of Locke Lamora-esque in a way, where he's clearly going to be trying to dip his toes into the unsavory sections of like the cities that he's exploring and really trying to get to the bottom of this like himself by doing the dirty work. And so I think that this sounds really entertaining, and as soon as I heard this book talked about, I was interested in it. So I'm really hoping that it gives those Joe Abercrombie and Scott Lynch vibes, because if it does, then I will love it for sure. Next up, we have The Other Side of Night by Adam Hamdy, which is basically a book that I bought without knowing too much about the synopsis on the recommendation of Gabby from Gabby Reads, because when she talked about this, it's kind of like a thriller that has really, really well fleshed out and well done characters, and it also made her emotional. And I really like a combination like that where something can be a mystery and thrilling, and we're really looking forward to like unraveling what this mystery is, but when it can also like get you emotional and get you really attached like that. It sounded right up my alley, so I got this secondhand as well, and I was really excited to find it, and I'm looking forward to reading it, honestly going in without knowing too much. Next up, we have another somewhat new release, though I trust that by this time a lot of people have already read this book, and that is Funny Story by Emily Henry. So I love Emily Henry from what I've read so far, and one of the things that I love about her is the same thing that I was talking about earlier with Abby Jimenez, where you get everything that you want from a romance book, but these characters often are also going through something individually, and you grow with them while they grow together. So that's one thing that I majorly love about Emily Henry, and I also love the premise of this book in particular, which is essentially a fake dating trope to get back at people, which sounds pretty entertaining to me. So we have our main character, Daphne, who is engaged to a man named Peter. They are literally about to get married, and her fiance Peter leaves her for his childhood best friend, or I should say best friend since childhood, is basically like, she's the girl you told me not to worry about, but at the very last minute you couldn't go through with marrying me, you're gonna go be with her now. And because all of this has happened, Daphne ends up as roommates with the best friend's ex as well, Miles. So Miles is our male main character, and him and Daphne end up living together, and while they're living together, they hatch this plan that they could get back at both of their exes by pretending to be together and essentially attending functions as a couple and being like, no, we're fine. Like, you guys should be happy because like we're dating now too. And so I just really love that concept. I'm a sucker for the fake dating trope in general, but I think that this will have like rom-com feels, rom-com vibes, and I really love that. So this is another book that it's giving summer. I'm really looking forward to getting to it this summer. And then finally, we have a book that is not so much like fun, but definitely very interesting, and I'm looking forward to for different reasons, and that is The Wager by David Gran, a tale of shipwreck, mutiny, and murder. So this is like a non-fiction account, I think, of both sides of a story where essentially a bunch of men show up on the coast of Brazil claiming to be the survivors of a shipwreck, but even like longer afterwards, more survivors show up and they claim that the first people were actually not survivors along with the rest of them, but had committed a mutiny and then had ended up surviving separately, I guess. So this all sounds very interesting. Like, as far as I know, this is sort of just like two sides of the story of like a true story, because I don't know if anybody knows what actually happened out there, but I'm very intrigued to read like sort of the evidence, I guess, presented by both sides and see all of the drama that went on. So I think this will be really, really interesting. And I've been trying to read more nonfiction, so I was very happy to find this used as well, because I was thinking about buying it at full price at one point. So that is the vast majority of the books that I've acquired over the last few months. There could be a few that I've missed or that I don't realize that I haven't hauled because I've already read them, but this is what I had to talk about for today, and a lot of books that I'm really, really excited about. So many different things, different genres, different vibes, and I hope that you were interested in hearing about them, and if you're interested in reading any of them, let me know. If you think that there are any that I should like bump up to the top of my priority list because you think I'll love them, please let me know that as well. But that is going to be it for this video, so thank you so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe if you would like to see more from me and you liked this video. As always, I will have my socials links down in the description if you're interested, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!